Hello YouTube. I made a friend today. And it's very weird how that often happens for me personally, where it's always coincidence. It's always like you randomly run into someone, you start up a conversation, you get to talking, and then all of a sudden you realize there's a lot in common between the two of you. Because it's pretty rare that I find people that I really resonate with, and so to just randomly run into someone. And sometimes it just takes the oddest coincidence in the way of, like, maybe you're wearing something. Like today, I was wearing a Mob Psycho shirt, right, like an anime shirt, and this person really likes anime and they'd seen a lot of anime. And other times it's, you know, maybe you have to like actively search. But what I've always found is with anything in life, when you actively search for something, that's the best way for it to elude you. And I'm going to get into that in this video. We're going to be talking about the creative process today. And I had just seen a video posted by Connor Woodman about how consumption culture limits your creativity. And when you're being creative, when you plant a seed, right, it's naturally going to grow into this tree and you'll be able to reap the fruit. Now that fruit can be financial and oftentimes it's spiritual. And the problem is most of us, we're so busy planting seeds for other people, right, in our work environment, in our work culture, for our families, that we never actually get to reap the fruit for ourselves, right? Because I do think that there's a very therapeutic aspect, a very spiritual aspect to creating art that brings balance to our lives, to our minds. Just for myself, that I found that as of today, right, you know, I had some things on my mind these last few weeks. They were going through there. And right now, finally, for the first day, I can say, like, hey, I'm whole, right? And it's because I was using the creative process to sort of go through a lot of things that have been going on with me lately. And that takes some time, right? The creative process takes time. And in our culture, in our materialist world, we're so inundated with things that we don't really have time, right? Even the conversation that I had with that guy today when we became friends, that's a conversation that doesn't really occur when you're on a tight schedule, when you're busy, right? For him, he had a pocket of time, I had a pocket of time, and in that pocket of time, we created the space for us to become friends, you know? And I think that's how we should be thinking about creation, in that creation requires time. It also requires some constraints, right? Because I just read a book, and it's called Steal Like an Artist. It was a big bestseller, and it's about the act of creativity. And what they were basically talking about is that creativity is like stealing in a way, in that you're taking from all these different sources, and then you're spitting it back out. Except you never steal from one source. It's like you're taking different ideas, you mesh it all together, and then you put it out into the world as like a final thing. And really, what's original about that process is the spin that you put on it. And then they mentioned about, like, hey, what you should be thinking about is trying to create the thing that you wish existed. Because if you want to be original, right, and that's what people crave nowadays. People crave an original and authentic person, right? They crave original and authentic entertainment, art, inventions. You know, and we're living in a society now that is so based on not necessarily like hard skills like it used to be in the past, but on like asking the right questions, even economically speaking, because there are so many, how do I say it? There's already so many workers that can fill the gaps in a lot of our work environments, right? Like, if you are a number on a machine, they can easily replace you with any number. So it really takes someone who's ingenuitive, who's creative, who can, you know, rehash things in order to become an economic powerhouse. That's on the corporate level. But if you think about it on the individual level, it's not any different. And so what does that require? What does that require to become a powerhouse when we're talking about the field of creativity? And I think it becomes important then to take what I was talking about earlier about what Connor Woodman mentioned in his consumption video and start separating in our mind this sort of idea that creativity is like a job. right? Because when you view creativity like a job, then it becomes this you're putting in a box, right? And it becomes very narrowing and very limiting to your own capacities. But if you view it as a lifestyle, that opens up a lot of doorways. Because if you think about it, somebody who's being creative, who's inspired to go and make a book, start a business, do an ad, make a necklace, whatever it is, they could be inspired by many different things, different types of songs, different type of genres. They could be on a long walk, something pops on their mind, they had a dream, they were doing some meditation. And so really, creativity is a very broad thing, right? There's no one way to be creative. But I think it does require an element of putting yourself out there in the world, meeting new people, going on long walks. There's a very introverted attitude and an explorative one, right, that's required if you want to be creative. And I think I've already mentioned why I think it's essential to be creative. Because if you get caught up in the consumptive modality, which is I am going to buy my needs, or I'm going to perform for other people, not only are you limiting what you're going to be creating, right? So you bring less of value into the world, but you also bring less value into it for yourself, right? Because there's something about the creative process that allows us to emotionally process, right, whatever it is in life that we're going to. Now, depending on your creative modality, creating something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to change you at your core. You know, like if you, for instance, create a birdhouse, chopped up some wood, you made a birdhouse. Does that change who you are on an identity level? Probably not. Right? Probably not. Does it make you feel better? Yes. Okay, so it made you feel better. Do people behave differently when they feel good? Yes. Okay, so you're going to behave differently. Are you more susceptible to making friends, to exercising properly, to taking care of other facets of your life? Yes. Now, here's another argument. Artists are typically schizoid or depressed or something like that. Is it the art that's making it that way? Or is it that these people were already schizoid, depressed, dealing with things, and then they use the art as a form of healing? Because I think it's much more likely to be the latter, because I know artists who aren't like that. Because art is like a way of healing. It's a healing modality. And it's a way, if you think about it from a psychological lens, right? You have your ego, you have your shadow, right? You have the you that you show to people, you know, that the you that's thinking and dealing with people. And then you have those parts of yourselves that you suppress and that you can't show to other people because they're not accepted, right? In some ways, I mentioned this in a previous video, art is what you use to tap into that repressed side, right? Your darker nature, because you can express yourself very freely in art. In fact, art requires you to, right? You know, because it's such a subjective thing. Nobody can really tell you, hey, your art is good or bad, it's beautiful or it's ugly. Your art just is your art, right? We can use some subjective criteria to measure it, right? I can say, hey, your art isn't good because of this, that, and the other, and my criteria might have a lot of merit, right? But that doesn't take away the inherent value of that creation for you. It just might have some consequences if we're talking about it in terms of like, what does the public think of that, or what do I think of that? But it doesn't change it for you. And so getting back to this whole thing about like the benefits of creation, right? And why it's so important in our current culture to be creating. And it's because when you're in the act of creation, right, then you step out of that act. Now you're in a sort of place where you can take off and do something else. But when you do that other thing, you're going to find that there's a ripple effect from creating that's going to help you create other things. And so now you develop momentum. It's like maybe you go from creating a song to you do a sketch Do you do a painting? Do you do some sort of form of creation with the job? And now all of a sudden your whole life is a creative act. And I think that people whose lives are filled with creative energy, with creative forces. Maybe you're a professional and blue collar professional, and then you go and you play on the drums for like 30 minutes at the end of the day and you feel alive, right? And I think on one reason, theoretically, why we feel like this, why we feel so alive when we're in the act of creativity, is because when you think about the world, it's like the world was created. Now, you could say, hey, it was created in a vacuum. Sure. I'm not coming from a theistic or non-theistic perspective. I'm open to all interpretations. The point stands that there had to have been nothing, and then there was something, right? I'm not aware, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below, I'm not aware of an idea out there that there was always something, right? So, okay, then we know that there's an element of causation in this world, right? And so it makes sense that on the smaller level, on the molecular level, that there's this driving force within us, right? Call it will to power, call it whatever you will, that is sort of mimicking this larger scale of life, that wants to give, that wants to create, right? Like it's almost an animalistic instinct, you know? Now, we know that force is within us. We know that that drive is within us. We have two choices. We can express it in a very healthy way, or we can suppress it. And you suppress it. What happens when you suppress it? I think that when you suppress the creative force and you inundate yourself with technology, with consuming, with watching TV, with watching Netflix, binge watching Netflix rather, right? And you do all this other stuff. What happens is you suppress those creative energies, and then it has to burst out. It's like libido, right? It's like that. It's that energy within you. And then it has to burst out because you've suppressed it all into your shadow, your other half. You're the side that you don't show to people. Where does it burst? Where does all that creative energy go, right? And I think for most people, they waste it on addictive behaviors, right? Like it could be at a bar on some night with some people and you drink, or maybe it's with social media consumption, or pornography is another big one. There's a lot of escapist mechanisms in the modern world that people use to handle this issue of libido, this issue of creative energy not being fully expressed and not being let out, right? So if I bring it back, you know, all the way to the beginning, when I said I met somebody today and we became friends, what I realized in our interaction is he told me something very important. And we were talking about an anime that we had watched. And he said that there was this scene where there was a girl, she was sweeping something with a broomstick and she was very anxious. And then like an older figure comes up to her and says, hey, you know, if you put the broomstick down and go for a walk, you know, you'll forget about what you were anxious about. Because no, you need to be able to understand that not everything that you're anxious about can be fixed in the moment, right? And the answer will come to you the moment you stop searching for that answer. Which is why I was saying earlier that a lot of times in life, you don't have the answer to certain things, to certain issues that are in front of you. Things about yourself, things about people around you, right? There's no point in you getting overly anxious, worrying about worrying about what the solution is to those issues, right? And running in reruns in your head, right? About jobs, about places, about friends, about family, about relationships. There's no point in that, you know. But what you can do is take a step back, right? Get back in tune with yourself. Go out and create something. And if you create something, you're going to get momentum. That momentum will carry you forward. Because who knows, maybe the thing that you create today, right, that small paper mache project, or that little necklace bead, or that 5-minute clip on YouTube is going to be the thing that lands you at the Grammys. Who knows? It could be, right? So don't limit yourself to thinking that you are somebody that can be placed in a box, right? Unfold the box, look out into the world, and be a creative person.